Welcome back to Notice That, an EMDR podcast. We are all three here again, 2 episodes in a row.
It's exciting.
Same outfit.
Same outfit.
Is what you would have
They'll
seen.
be released, I think, different time.
Totally.
I think so. I'm not sure, actually.
But it's
Don't
the
think
same
about
day.
that too much.
We didn't all coordinate the same clothes,
No.
a month later.
We just recorded one.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, wait. So before we get started, we promised ourselves that we would talk about Florida. You guys ready to talk about Florida?
Florida.
So the first thing I want to say about Florida.
We're just talking about Florida.
Florida. That's exactly right.
Florida.
Look, so I love traveling, and the last time that we got to go to Florida, the thing that I keep thinking about, there's 2 things
Big
that I
things
think about a lot.
happened.
Well, yeah, but the 2 things out of all of the things that happened in Florida was, number 1, Olivia, which is Bridger's wife, was with us on this trip, and her standing on the back patio of our beautiful training facility, yelling at a crocodile that would never appear to her because she wanted to see this crocodile so badly.
Sounds like Olivia.
Yeah, and so it was just this moment of pure little kid honesty of I desperately want to see this crocodile, and maybe I can convince it if I yell. Yeah. But we
did
did
just a yell. It was like a call.
Yeah, that's true. It was a very nurturing
she does
yell.
Speak crocodile.
Yeah, or she was trying to learn it real fast. Yeah. Anyway, so the facility that we get to train at when we're in Florida is outrageous. It is in a pine forest that has been curated by the university. There is a big pond closer to a lake.
There
is a crocodile
and her baby
and her babies that live in there. We saw the babies. We never saw the mama.
Next time we go, they may not be babies.
Well, that's true. It could be filled with big crocodiles.
Whoa. Hold on.
Please come join us.
So
it's a
there was
wildlife
that
conservation area, okay?
There was that. But we were in Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised by the food in Gainesville, Florida.
Oh my gosh.
I still think about that sushi.
I know. That place was unreal. So if you come to Gainesville, Florida, we are going to do 2 trainings there, and we're going to give you all the info in a second.
Time.
But the way that I'm leading off with why you should come to Florida is, number 1, crocodiles. Number 2, food. And number 3, we're doing some SIP trainings there.
There you go. Beautiful.
In February. Also,
February.
So if you're from a colder area.
Yeah, come be a snowbird in Florida with us and eat some sushi and yell at crocodiles. Yeah. But we are doing something that we've never done before, which is all 4 of us as trainers are going because we are doing dual trainings. We're doing a SIP 1 training and a SIP 2 training next to each other in the same building. So we're all going to be hanging out in one space.
How that goes.
Yeah. But I'm really excited
about
it.
The tech side is going through my head nonstop.
Will you hold that and thank you. Thank you for that.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
So speaking of the tech side, you can come in person. But if you...
I'm going to come in person.
Yes, you definitely can.
You're saying to them, I legitimately was confused.
No, everyone can come in person, and we would love that because it's a beautiful space with plenty of room and crocodiles and sushi. But also you can come virtually if you can't attend in person. I think, though, that if you can come in person...
At all possible,
it is... SIP trainings are made to be in person. They're just better. Not that virtual is not, just as adequate in many, many ways, but the relational experience, because it is such a relational training, and just, if it's at all possible, come be with us.
Yeah. Be there in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking for registration information, that can all be found at our website. Just connectbeyondhealing.com under the For Therapist tab. You'll see SIP 1 and SIP 2, and then the Register Now link will take you right there. It'll drop you in also to our Beyond Healing community.
Yeah.
So you get that as well. Which is a super robust space with all kinds of connection, all kinds of people there. And you'll see all kinds of consultation opportunities after the training as well, hosted on Beyond Healing community. And we'd love to see you there.
Yeah. Yes. And if you don't know what SIP is, because that could be true for some people, we have previous episodes where we go into long descriptions about it. There's descriptions on the website. Yeah. We would happily talk to people about it to get more info. But basically, SIP is how Beyond Healing does therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is how we conceptualize our work and our lives as human beings and what it means to be a therapist doing this kind of work. So it's one of our favorite things to do.
didn't plan on saying this here, but it fits.
Oh, okay.
We are going to do a 2-hour kind of basic training on case conceptualization. And so, like, what is case conceptualization, which tees us up perfectly for SIP.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in the SIP training or are thinking about doing it, but not sure about the financial investment or the 3-day investment or to travel, join us for the 2-hour training. It'll be free. We'll post details about it. We'll put it in the show notes because I should have them by then.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have the dates and times, and it will be held virtually. And you get 2 hours of EMDR advanced training hours for it and 2 NBCC continuing education hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's completely free, gives you kind of an introduction into case conceptualization and why it's important, and in EMDR specifically, and then we'll launch from that into 3 beautiful days of exploring it through the SIP lenses.
In Florida.
In Florida. Or on your computer while we're in Florida.
Right, right. And if you happen to be on your computer, I will personally escort a computer out so that maybe they could see a crocodile too. I'll try to make that happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
You could probably
It's
zoom
also
in with your
video
phone.
it.
Okay.
Or
okay. That makes a lot more sense.
But just so you go with your laptop.
But look, I'm open to carrying a laptop out to the lake and showing people the crocodiles.
Totally.
Nice.
Okay.
So for the actual content of
Yes.
today's episode, I'm really excited about just the vision for next season. And we're going to go into back to the basics for next season. But we want to start like dabbling into that and exploring it now in preparation of that. And this has come because of a lot of comments, questions, requests for more information from our consultees about how do we work in this really relational way that we emphasize on the podcast and in all the work that we do, and still stick to something that has such a protocol, right? The 8-phase protocol. And where does it fit in? Does it? Do we just scrap it?
What
Does
happens when it
everything kind
goes
of fall in
wrong or
it?
something
Yes.
comes across that we don't understand? Like, where do we go from there?
Right. And if we're just doing relational work, are we even falling within the 8 phases? Like,
is that
all of
real
these pieces.
EMDR? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to kind of start in looping in this area and kind of exploring to tee us up for, an entire season on going back through the 8 phases, phase by phase, and really digging into the details of each phase.
Mm-hmm. And really to kind of put a request out for people to send in questions and thoughts about their relationship with the 8-phase protocol of EMDR.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how does it feel? How did it feel when you learned it that way? How has it evolved in your practice? Because I think it feels very different at the beginning than as things progress. And you get more comfortable with it. And while we have kind of our personal feelings towards it, I don't want that to make it feel like if somebody really loves the protocol and the scripts and things like that, that there's not room for that, because our opinion about it is probably going to be kind of obvious, but I want to nuance that of why we still really believe in the script and why we still teach the 8-phase protocol and why it matters, even though the vast majority of the time, I don't know that the 3 of us are adhering very strictly to any of that. Yeah. And so how do we hold all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I also think this is a beautiful conversation to be had in the larger EMDR community, because EMDRIA is not the only organization.
Especially not now.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, to me, when we start talking about EMDR culture here in the US, there is such a prevalence on the fidelity of EMDRIA's EMDR, and nothing against that. Like, obviously, we are all
pro that.
Yes, and that's where our licensure and our certification is through. So yes, but then for those EMDR Australia, EMDR China, EMDR Canada, like all of the ways of conceptualizing the professional encounter of EMDR, that one thing in common is the 8 phases. And so that's really where going back to the basics in this way is something that we all share this in common in some way. We have a conceptualization of the 8 phases and how we're working through that with our clients and what that actually looks like. So to me, this is a beautiful conversation also to bring diversity together.
Yeah. Well, and I think within that, there is a lot of room for important influential factors like the context that you're in, the professional context that you're in, meaning private practice versus agency, all of those things come to bear on what is our relationship with the 8-phase protocol.
Yeah.
My feelings about it and the ways that I'm using it and in relationship with it when I was in agency life is totally different than now. And I wonder if I was still in agency life, that's hard to imagine, but if I was, I think it would be very different than how it functions in private practice. And, how does it function in a retreat setting versus a long haul relationship where I'm seeing somebody, every week? So all of those factors are relevant in this conversation around how do we understand what the 8 phases really are rather than just words on paper. How do we make sure that we know how to apply it given the whole context of the situation that we're in with a client? Those are all things that we want to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you're talking about it, Melissa, with the relationship to the 8 phases. Because again, that's something we all have, and reflecting on that relationship explicitly, to me is a really meaningful and to me a necessary part of how you are as an EMDR therapist, like how you actually conduct yourself in practice.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Oh, so can I ask it as a different kind of question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. In an EMDR session, this might be slightly provocative language. Okay. Are you the boss or is the protocol the boss?
Easy answer.
Just ask.
I'm the boss everywhere.
I'm the boss everywhere. I love that you just said that because I bet people don't know that about you.
A protocol, I could not ever let be the boss of me.
Let be the boss of me.
Jen's actually the bossiest of us all. That's true. Own it. Stand in your power. I believe in you.
Stand in your power. Yeah, I also have a. It's. I think it's a little bit of a different energy for me because to me, there's no bosses.
Yeah, your answer is boss?
Yeah, what's a boss? And that doesn't make sense to me. But in my mind, the 8 phases are there as a guiding framework. But I still think it's, the question of fidelity in that I understand is kind of messy. And how do you train something as a guideline rather than a protocol? But to me, like, just to answer your question, what is a boss? So you said you're the boss.
Yeah,
I'm the boss.
Which is interesting because I'm also like a rule follower, right? Like I'm very rigid to rule following, but
no, I don't know that you're a rule follower. You're a right follower.
Yeah, you will do what is right.
So I guess I'll just explain, like, my relationship with the protocol is great. Like, it gave me a framework. It works so well.
We have a really healthy relationship. We communicate well. Just keep going. I'm loving
it. Very tuned, and it gives me a structure and a framework that I can make sense of many different things. I can fit just about anything into any one of those phases. So to me, it's not limiting. It just gives a framework and a structure to be able to communicate with someone else who might know and understand that language and have that shared, framework. SIP is very similar. When we started developing the concepts of SIP, I struggled of this is a whole new framework and I'm not ready to get rid of this framework. So when I felt like it really, I could fully embody and own SIP from an objective place is when I said they both fit together. It can still work. I can keep them both. I don't have to get rid of one.
I don't have to change my allegiance.
Yeah.
And I don't need 2 flags. I just have one, and there it is.
So to me, the 8 phases aren't limiting and don't dictate anything for me. It's just this nice guideline to say when I'm doing this, I can ask myself, if it were to fit into this, where would that fall? And how could that help me gain clarity of the overall process even more? Not get lost in the weeds. It gives me a bit of clarity and flow to the work that we're doing.
What would you say?
Oh, the boss question? Yeah. I didn't imagine answering that myself. That was just for you guys.
No, you need to answer the question.
Well, so I guess the analogy in my head doesn't feel connected to boss. It's sort of like, is a book that I'm reading the boss of me, or am I the boss of it? Well, irrelevant. It just is what it is. But I think that the 8 phases feel very much like a table of contents to me. It's just the identifier of something that is a lot more complex and a lot more nuanced. And you can get a lot of information just from the table of contents and those headings, but the actual work of it feels that's not what I'm thinking about usually when I'm actually doing the work with clients. I might kind of use it as a way of top-level organizing things, much in the way that a table of contents kind of organizes a book and is a good entry point to kind of get the lay of the land before you enter into it. But then once you're there, there's so much more that feels more helpful to me to consider and track and conceptualize with, that I tend to kind of let go of it once I've gone through the door labeled phase 4. You know, I open the door, I walk through, and now we'll see, you know, wild, wild west now.
There's so much that could be there.
Yes.
It's not, it's infinite of what could fall with on the other side of that door. But I need a door. I like having doors and locations.
And the hallway.
And locations with labels of like, this is the door for today. And I think that's why I both love the protocol and also want to distance myself from feeling restricted by it, because it can very easily feel that way once we're actually through the door. Like, we're not meant to linger there. We can't go as far as we really need to usually if we stay stuck within just that framework. But it's a beautiful launching pad.
I think one of the errors with the 8 phases is people associate the scripts that we're given with each phase as if you open the door and all that's there is the script. And then you have to go back to the hallway. Like, to me,
to get to the next one.
Yes. And you're supposed to just like open that door, come back in, and like keep moving. And I think that association of the script equals the phase is really damaging to the work that we're doing with. If the phase is about how do I conceptualize this this phase of work we're doing, like this like phase of the relationship and of the healing that's happening, not as it has to be this script and this certain process. That script's helpful for someone who's saying, I've never opened this door and I have no idea how to start or what to do in there. Like, it's a great learning tool. But past that point, like, the possibilities of what could happen in that phase are enormous. And so to not feel limited, but to feel like I could really go a lot of directions in this and it still fall within like, this is kind of what we're doing and where we're headed.
Yeah. One of the things I talk with consultees about is that phases are not linear, even in the conceptualization of like what a phase is. We impose a linear progression in our mindset in the West because that's what numbers mean. You don't just say 1 and 4 and 7.
1 always has a relationship to 0 and 2.
And 2, exactly. Yes, we assume a linear progression, but phases don't function like that. They are overlapping and sometimes entirely concentric. They are in themselves inherently related. So with that mind, I really like your idea of, we can't just assume that the script is the phase, because that to me moves from a 3 or 4 dimensional space to a 2-dimensional slide, like on a PowerPoint. We miss all of the nuance and all of the purpose for the script, which, like you said, is to start the conversation and to give us some general parameters of what this is going to look like as we progress through, but it's not the whole thing. What a disappointing experience it'd be to go to an art show and just have one painting to look at and then to come out and then only see just another one. Like, okay, and then you're done, like, leave.
Okay, so what about fidelity?
Yes. I was also thinking of, what about teaching this? Because I think those are two things that seem to put some like they impose themselves on this non-linear process that we're talking about.
Mhm.
Say like, but it must be done with fidelity, and you have to be able to teach it
Right.
with standardized expectations.
I feel like I should know this, so I'm embarrassed to say it on here. But does MDRIA have standards of fidelity?
Yes.
I know we have it's always emphasized the definition of EMDR,
Yep.
and there's certain objectives, but is there a set standards of this is what has to be maintained through fidelity?
Mm-hmm. So
we need to bring that into an episode and talk through them, because
it is the 8-phase protocol. That is the fidelity.
But it's the script that we have taken to say fidelity means follow this script.
Mm-hmm.
From my understanding, without actually seeing a document that has it lined out, fidelity really is like the AIP theory, and then going through and following those 8 phases. But it's not to say like within this phase, fidelity means you do this
X, Y,
set
and Z.
thing.
Mhm.
I think that has been left open to interpretation. And that is part of why there is a lot of conversation and some disagreement around it, because how do you interpret what phase 1, phase 4 means? There are a lot of trainers that have interpreted that as it is the script. And we, sit on the side of, no, it's not the script. It is so much more than that. And we train it that way. We train it as a broader conceptualization, and the script guides us in that. But I think that there would be argument about that.
There was, in our interview with Jackie Flynn, she, and I'm going to have to go back and listen to it now, or maybe just text her and ask her, what did you say? She had so beautifully put just this idea of like, fidelity is about meeting this point or this goal. How we get there is not dictated to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's about getting to that point.
Yeah.
And so the journey of point A to point B is left to the individual experience and the therapist and what they bring in and the client.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this misinterpretation, at least in my opinion, of to get to A and B, we have to drive this certain car in this straight line. That's fidelity. That's an impossibility. Like, that's just not real human interaction.
A consultee was sharing with me that the site that they're at has use of this tool called the EMDR fidelity rating scale.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an actual measurement.
All those words make me feel super uncomfortable.
But that exists. Like, that's out there and being used.
Yeah, EMDRfoundation.org.
Yeah, and it's being used in research, because in order for EMDR to be researched, it has to be standardized.
That feels different to me, though, than researching it versus practicing it.
Yeah.
But research ends up informing practice.
And yeah. But that, to me, yes, like the fidelity element, it's tough to uphold any certain, even in a research setting, there's a margin of error that's associated with what boundary of fidelity we're willing to accept. But within the larger training kind of field, I think that's where we're seeing some of these breaking apart of allegiance to any one EMDR training facility, because how we feel about fidelity is inherently subjective.
Yes.
Fidelity is a subjective identifier that has objective implications, like of what it means to do EMDR or not do EMDR. But to uphold or like enforce a fidelity is up to usually like a research panel or a governing body or something like that to say this is the consensus of fidelity.
Right.
Because I've heard of different EMDR organizations using something equivalent to that, or having something like a panel review for fidelity. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how do you guys define for yourself why you still consider work that you do as being within the fidelity model of EMDR? We're still very much doing it, even though we don't always follow the script. But I don't think any of us feel a lot of tension in saying, no, this is absolutely EMDR. And no, this isn't in any of the manuals.
Right.
Like, I didn't say, I didn't say the things verbatim. So I'm curious how you would answer that. I think at least a part of my answer is because if I have made modifications away from the script, I'm very aware of why I decided to do that. It is not done because
Flippantly or
no, and it's not done because I don't know what the script says.
Yeah.
Like I can say it verbatim if I choose to, but there are times where in order to achieve the goal of the phase, deviation from the script is what I believe will get us there the fastest and the safest for the client. And so if there are changes made, it is still made with fidelity in mind. If fidelity is defined as getting to that point, getting to that goal, and not necessarily it must be done in this particular way.
One thing I say to all of my consultees in like a certification program or our EMDR refresh is we're going to go back to the basics and break it down to the most granular level of each phase, like what's happening neurobiologically here, what's happening in the nervous system here, what's happening relationally here. And then from that, we will expand upon that and start getting into the advanced concepts of it.
Yeah.
Because if we can understand the why behind each phase on its deepest level, then there's so much freedom and expansiveness of where we can go with that. And it's still motivated. We can make those decisions to step away from what might be the most standard direct approach because we understand that it's needed and how it will be helpful. All of the new pieces we bring in are informed.
Yes.
They're not random. They're not happenstance. They're not just like, let me randomly grab
it's
something.
Not because I got overwhelmed in the moment and don't know what EMDR would do about this and defaulted back to a different modality that I'm more comfortable with.
Right.
Yes. It's very informed, very intentional.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm saying it that way is like that is a tension point and a struggle point for a lot of people that we talk to.
And one that's frequently realized.
Oh, yeah.
That, I don't know, so I'm going to go into EFT
I'm
going to go into
to ego state work because that's what I know how to do. That's where I'm comfortable. And so I'm kind of letting go of EMDR because it got too hot and I'm going to go to the thing that I feel more comfortable with. So that's not what we're talking about. The deviations are still within the phase of EMDR if the deviations are made with the neurobiological realities of what that phase is trying to achieve front and center in our conceptualization.
Yes.
And that's part of what I kind of hope to do in the Back to Basics series is share how we make sense of what is happening neurobiologically with each of these phases and how do we track whether we're actually achieving that in the system or not.
Yeah.
Because if the protocol is not achieving the goal of the phase, then we necessarily need to change the protocol in order to be doing EMDR.
Yeah.
And if we don't do that, then that's why we have people that think that EMDR doesn't work for certain people.
Yeah, and I think that's really the tension that our field as a whole must be talking about because the blame is so volatile in what you just described of if the protocol isn't reaching its intended goal. Well, I think we look at that and say, well, yeah, let's talk about what's coming up in the session.
Why does that make sense for that human being?
Yes. But there are others that I wonder if they'd have something's wrong with the clinician. They're not doing it the right way. And so for those two realities to exist on the same spectrum, that means we need to be talking about this. Well, and I feel like that's why we're going back to content that we've already named explicitly before in this podcast, but now together in our consensus, being in its diversity of how we emphasize certain things or how we, guide a client and join them in the process of venturing through this phase, whatever it might be. That's why we're doing it is it's important to the people that we work with, but it's also important just to start the conversation on a larger level of what are we going to do about this in building community around EMDR as a whole, not just what Emdria would say or what EMDR Australia or whatever. Don't just look to the organization to give you the next printout of here's how you say what you need to say.
We don't need script updates.
No.
Because there's not enough paper in the world to make enough scripts with enough nuance that will meet the individual needs of each human being on each consecutive day of their life and the current activation state of their nervous system.
If there were to be a semicolon of Back to the Basics, it would be, it's not in a script. That's the whole thing.
Okay, so I want to speak to another reality that tends to be really connected to this. Is it's one thing for us that number one, have the community that we do, the support that we do, the experience that we do, to say, the script is not the end all be all. But when you're brand new at this, when you're trying to learn, when you're, we have an intern at work right now. She's like at the very beginning, like trembling hands with script.
EMDR.
Here, push button, like we're right there. And it's so important. And for me to say, oh, don't worry about the script, would feel dismissive, would feel unhelpful, would feel invalidating.
Decontextualizing.
And would probably mean that she decides that she doesn't want to do EMDR at all.
Why would I?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think like that's the tension of this conversation is we're not saying that the script is not important, good, needed, useful, strong, valid, well-tested and researched. It is all of those things. And it is also not the EMDR God.
Right.
And the EMDR God is the human nervous system.
That's right.
And so have a personal relationship. I don't want to get too religious about this. That'll weird me out. I'm not going to do that.
We're there already.
Okay. Oh, yikes. My point is that when we can understand what is actually happening neurologically, then we can feel the freedom to let go and let it be a lot more nuanced and relational. But until we're there, we can be held in the safety of the script.
Yeah.
And that's okay and good and beautiful. And I
it
want
provides
that.
a language.
Yeah.
Like that's another piece to me that we can't separate ourselves from the 8 phases as an organizing principle, because without it, we'd have no way to talk to each other outside of, well, this is what's coming up. And then we'd start challenging each other on, what turns into sometimes like a bad group supervision experience where you're just like, well, have you tried this? Well, you did this wrong.
Bridger, I think that if you ever decide to do EMDR, whatever group supervision experience you had where that happened to you has got to be top of your target list, because you talk about that.
It's a general, I hear it all the time. It's actually now, it's participation trauma.
Right, no, it's like it's a trope for you. It's a thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing that people talk to me about. It's just like, well, I don't know, and I don't want to say something and then somebody's going to tell me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, the scripts, in utilizing those or teaching them, it's a collusion of the strategy. Like it's just another strategy to go in and do this kind of like trauma work, memory reconsolidation. Like this is some seriously vulnerable, intimate, powerful stuff we're doing. Yeah. And so a strategy to do that is to have something like mapped out with really like gentle, cautious words. And like, it's a strategy that is, and strategies aren't bad. They can be hurtful if we aren't aware of them. But if I'm to use a script with somebody or encourage someone else, it says, let's collude with your need for that strategy. Utilize that until you feel safe enough, or maybe the client feels safe enough to start to let go of it. And then we can explore, like, what is it like without that strategy?
Some good SIP language you got there.
See those two frameworks? They just go so well
beautifully together. If you don't have language for one here, you can see it over there.
We could do a whole episode, just a series, and just comparing all of our SIP language and EMDR.
Maybe we'll do a little certification process is, basically.
So I do feel drawn to give people maybe some kind of tangible examples of some of what we're talking about to kind of help them get a sense of what ground we might cover in the back to basics.
Yeah.
I have one that was like coming to my mind. I had to like
I've got one too. So you go first.
3.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This one feels so little and silly, but like when we're training a basic training, there is a slide that says, when everyone asks the infamous question, how many sets do I do on the first one?
Yeah.
23.
It's actually 24.
24. That's how important it is, right?
You don't even remember what it says.
24. You start with 24 sets.
Yeah.
Why? Well, that's what Francine Shapiro said in her second book.
Yep.
So that's what you do.
That's true.
Why? Like, let's talk about that. Let's actually...
There's a more meaningful answer than because
Francine said so.
Like,
yeah, that's true.
So let's, in the Back to Basics series, like, let's talk about that. Why might that be where we decided to start? And why might you do less than that? And why might you do more than that?
Yeah. And there's a real answer to all of that.
There is. There's so much to say. And we try to dabble in it in a basic training.
The intensity the speed,
Oh,
all of
of
those
it.
are super meaningful.
Which means with the first person that you do with, it might be 6 sets that you do, and on the next it might be 50 passes. Like,
Or
And
it might be
auditory
280.
and-
All
I'm
of
just
it.
saying
Yeah.
that happens
Right.
too.
Yes, auditory, tactile,
Yeah.
like, or
of
visual,
these.
like
Yeah.
all of these things matter.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
I also am going to talk about that in a drop-in with Beyond
Or,
here
or
soon,
wait a
just so
second.
you
Can
know.
you do EMDR and not use BLS?
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm just.
should I not answer that yet?
Is there a
not
script
yet.
for that?
Is it the same script and you just don't push the button?
What do I
Could be.
say, though? My question,
Uh-huh.
what's the first phase?
We don't even have an answer to that. We're screwed.
I have more questions. What do you mean by that?
What is it? Which
Like,
one?
what is phase 1?
Say it.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
This is a trick question, Bridger. Don't be rude.
I love this
I
question.
don't understand what you're trying to ask.
It's history taking.
Uh-huh.
Is it, though?
No.
Well, we don't teach it that way.
Yes.
And
the
we
whole
don't.
That's your
thing.
point. Okay, I
Yes,
didn't know what
that's
you were
the whole
getting
point.
at. But
We
yeah.
don't teach it that way because we have a neurobiological and relational explanation of
reason
why it's
for that.
better to
Yeah.
switch it.
Yes.
Yes. And I do want to speak to something that you just said, which is in a basic training, an initial training, we have 5 to 6 days depending on the format. There is no way that we can do justice to the neurological explanation for the why
It's just information.
behind all of
Yeah.
Like,
this.
they're just like, ugh.
I know. Well, yeah. I mean, like, not only are you trying to learn how to do this new thing and having the awkwardness of practicing on people you don't know and also receiving your own experience of doing trauma work in public, whoa, but also to be inundated with a whole bunch of neurological explanation, you can't integrate that much.
Mhm.
But I do think as trainers, we have a lot of room for improvement in indicating that there is a valid reason why, and that even though we're not teaching it, there is room for deeper nuancing
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
all of this.
And that all that curiosity is so welcomed.
Yes. Yeah.
My pet peeve is when questions are met with the defensiveness of like, no, you have to stick to it because
Mhm.
it's what the book says.
Yeah.
Like, no, be curious. Ask about it. Say why. Let's ask why together. And then let's
Yes.
hypothesize. Because even the answers we might give neurobiologically still are some hypothesis in it. Like, there's
Totally.
no way
There's
we
really
can
tremendous
really
amount of
know.
hypotheses. Yeah.
So let's bring all of that into it and let EMDR and the
Yeah.
protocol be this fluid, flexible thing that is
Mhm.
hypothesis.
Yeah. Another piece for me about the season that's interesting is I can hear a good friend of ours saying that EMDR should not be taught in those 5 days or those 2 different trainings, like part
Mhm.
1, part 2.
This isn't how we learn best.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So it should be done over relationship and in consultation. And so that I can't wait to talk about that as well.
Mhm.
What was the question that you
Oh, so we all get this question, and I just got it again, I think on our last drop-in with Beyond Call, and it's such an important question of what the heck is looping?
had?
Like what is happening? You know, why does that happen at all? Also, why do we call it looping? That's
Yeah.
an interesting word. And in SIP, we completely redefine looping, and except it's the same thing, just with so much more nuance, that when looping in the way that we use it in EMDR shows up in a session, we conceptualize it as something entirely different and have a much more nuanced understanding of, well, how do you offer some kind of interaction in that moment to help the loop integrate and
Instead
proceed?
of being stuck.
Instead of be stuck, because the stuckness is not what we have been taught that it is. It doesn't mean that something is going wrong or that the process is just on halt.
Right.
And I think that's kind
There's
of how
meaning
it's
there.
how
Yeah.
it's taught. But when we understand what's happening behind the scenes in the brain, and what we can offer to the system that might have a more integrated experience for whatever's happening, then interweaves become a lot easier to select.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the big growth curves for a new EMDR therapist is, oh my God, how do I know enough interweaves? How do I select the right one?
You always have to have the manual and that page mark so that you can go back to it.
And I gotta open it up and then hope to choose the right one out of these 50 interweaves of what might be useful right now. How in the world do I know that?
Yeah.
Great question. That really is a really good question. And the answer is, it's not arbitrary if we understand what's really going on.
Yeah. And I know we all mean this when we say the word neurobiology, but we're evoking quite a bit of shared conversation between us about what that means. But we're talking about interpersonal affective neurobiology.
Yes.
So,
which I was just wondering, like, are people actually interested in knowing that? I am. We're interested. Is that
I think if they're listening
representative
to
of
this
our general
podcast,
population?
Probably, yeah.
it's kind of
Okay.
like, I
Well-
hope so, but I don't know how we're going to talk about it without getting into that.
Yeah.
We're gonna have
And
to.
our way of talking about neurobiology, because it is interpersonal and affective, is we can talk about it without it just being a long string of words like posterior cingulate cortex
Mhm.
that means very little to most of us. I like your face right
I
now,
didn't
Jen.
like that.
Yeah, like, that
What's wrong
that
with
means
that?
something, that means something to a few of us, but for most humans, it doesn't mean much as opposed to the anterior cingulate cortex.
That
Totally
means
different.
way more. Thank you for changing that one. I feel so much better.
I don't like this.
I think this is my point.
I don't like why you're making fun of this.
And so
I'm
for
just
those
trying
of
to really
us,
embody and
for those
show
of us
what
that
we
like
do.
Yeah, I'm
like
sure you
those
are.
words, we can say them, but then we're also going to say, what do those words actually mean? Why are they relevant, both interpersonally in therapy, but then also specifically in EMDR? Why do we care about which ones are lit up and activated at different times?
From
and
what
how-
we can tell.
Oh yeah, from what we can tell, and it's
Yeah.
all a hypothesis.
That's
And how do we let that inform our decision making, but not have it be so complex that it feels overwhelming?
Yeah.
That will be the great challenge. So maybe what this series will be is if we got to do an EMDR training with as much time as we wanted in a fantasy world where we could bring therapists to Springfield for a month and take care of them and feed them and learn together
We're gonna learn EMDR.
experientially. Like you're going to come for a whole month and just be marinating in some EMDR stew with us. This is all the stuff that we would share if we had all the time in the world. So not only would we cover the basics and the scripts and the black and white how-tos, but we would share the nuance and the neurobiology and the affective experience of
Yeah,
it.
the embodiment.
Yes,
Yeah.
the sensation of it. The how does this actually sensorially feel and show up, and how do we track it with our own body?
Yeah.
Because all of that is relevant. And maybe we should just do that
I was
someday
gonna say,
for
are you
real.
doing one of those like manifesting things?
No, I realize that I might
Actually
be.
That's what I
speak,
feel.
And then I'm like, universe, are you listening to this?
So did we just have an idea? A 30-day EMDR intensive
I
experiential
know people
training?
that would say, that sounds amazing.
I really want to do that all of a sudden.
I don't feel like it's far from what we have been talking
Oh,
about and are
really?
doing.
Okay.
Just a few
I'm just-
switches on a
yeah.
couple things, and it's
Couple things.
happening.
I wonder where we would do it.
You're funny.
I was
Probably
gonna
right.
say,
Right here in this space that we're sitting in is
Okay.
exactly where we would
Oh.
do it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We now have a
Universe.
lovely retreat house with plenty of space where people could come and stay for a while. Anyway, so if you're interested in that, send me an email because I'm curious. But
We'll send around a petition.
yeah, that's how I manifest things is petitions.
There's the 50 people. I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
But I
That's
think
exactly how you do it. This is
don't give
no
away my
joke
secrets.
right now.
No, I know. I didn't mean to. It wasn't intentional. But I do think that back to the basics can cover all of it if we
Yeah.
let it, because I don't think that we need to put any cap on how many, episodes we're going to
No.
use for this. Like we can take the time that we want to take and we can
We don't have
go
a boss
slow.
dictating what we're supposed to do.
You're
on
the
this?
boss.
Oh, yeah, okay.
what's
Well,
a
I
boss?
agree.
What's a boss?
There's
Stamp
no
of
boss.
approval.
Bosses
It is
aren't
certainly
real.
not the script.
No.
Mhm. So, how do you guys want to wrap up and
Well, I want
summarize
to
this?
share that idea of doing a training like that. I love it. But even just what we currently have, like we have
Mhm.
these resources.
Mhm.
What we're talking about sharing, it's not new to how we've been talking in consultation. We've never talked about it as organized on the podcast, but we have an EMDR refresh group. So this is consultation 6 months. We meet once a month, and it's for those who've been trained in EMDR but want to do consultation-based learning and say, I did that training, but there's some things I don't understand, or I think I understand, but how does it really apply, and how do I integrate it into my practice? We get to ask those questions. Why 24 sets for the first one? What is looping? All of those
Mhm.
pieces throughout 6 months with a cohort. So it's the same group of people throughout the entire 6 months. It's beautiful. with that, you get access to the community, a lot of different resources.
And 12 advanced credits.
Yeah. Yeah, that little bonus there.
Yeah, 12 advanced credits through Andrea.
Yes, because it has a video curriculum that's additional to the consultation.
Yep.
So you can sit down and actually hear Melissa and I talking about these concepts throughout the 8 phases.
Yeah, and it's all, if you have the app, the Beyond Healing Community app, you can listen to that anywhere you are. So super nice.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you have the refresh.
The refresh certification. So if you want to get certified in EMDR, if you haven't been certified, or if you have and you just want to go through the process again because it's been a while, or maybe you didn't enjoy your experience, it's an 8-month long program, can be extended longer if you desire, but it's a minimum of 8 months. And we do this exact thing if we go back through all 8 ACEs.
8 ACEs. I love that one. Caleb would be proud of you.
Didn't even try. Break it down and then build it back up to the most advanced aspects of those phases and working with our challenging clients throughout those phases. And that is done.
So of advanced application.
Yes. Certification, though, before we move on, is done as a consultation team. So it's either Melissa or I with another consultant in training from Beyond. And so we approach as a team to actually have 2 consultants have access to their experience and knowledge and wisdom throughout the process.
And is it true that when they're doing certification, they get access to drop in with Beyond as well?
Correct.
Just as a bonus to come
weekly
in.
calls of more information.
With all of us. So you get access to all of us senior consultants that do
yes.
this.
Yeah. And then the advanced program. So if you're maybe already certified or have taken the EMDR refresh or some of our basic content already, and you want to go more into like advanced topics, advanced protocols, special populations, all of those pieces, there's a 6-month long program for that as well. Consultation based. There's video curriculum.
You'll also get drop in
with Beyond,
as well.
Yeah. Well, lots of consultation happening.
Lots of EMDR.
Tons of opportunities.
And next year we'll launch EMDR Academy. Just kidding.
EMDR Academy.
She's already named it.
I'm great at naming things.
This is how this goes.
Next thing we know, we're gonna
That's
get
not real, you guys. That was truly a joke. Like, yeah,
we
that
wouldn't name it
really
Academy.
a joke. No. We wouldn't name it Academy. This is how all of this got started.
Yeah, this is dangerous. We need to wrap this up.
No,
We're gonna have a new business contract here before we know.
Deep breath.
Cool.
All right.
I'm excited.
So we're going to go back to the basics.
It's not in the script.
In January.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
We've got some great episodes between now and then, though.
Yes.
we will be going through it before then. So
Yeah, we'll start recording.
Yeah.
So send us questions
Yeah.
and curiosities around this tension that we hold between protocol and feeling free to do what we need to do, and how that feels to you guys, because we want to talk about it.
What are the things you want to know the why behind?
Yeah.
And give us time to figure that out, give our hypotheses, and
we'll talk
about it. Yeah.
Love it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.